Lost my wife to the galactic war. Found her naked in my bed 5 years later. The empty years. The rain fell in sheets across Zerka's Vale the way it always did, turning the atmosphere processing station into an island of humming machinery surrounded by endless gray. Rayan Ashraf stood at his monitoring console, watching pressure readings he could recite from memory, living a life that had become little more than routine, punctuated by silence. 5 years. 5 years since he'd kissed Nadira goodbye at the military hangar, her flight jacket smelling of ozone and determination. 5 years since her cruiser vanished into the quantum phase zones where the Whispered waged their incomprehensible war. No distress beacon, no debris field, just emptiness where his wife had been, and a military official handing him her service tags with practiced sympathy. He kept her jacket draped over the chair in their bedroom, his bedroom now, though he still thought of it as theirs. Every night he'd run his fingers over the worn patches on the elbows, remembering how she'd stolen his favorite sweater so many times it had become hers. The holographic player on the nightstand held 47 messages she'd sent during her deployment. He'd watched them all so many times he could lip-sync her words, see the exact moment her smile would shift from playful to wistful. Tonight marked exactly 5 years. The anniversary settled in his chest like a stone. The storm intensified as darkness fell, lightning illuminating his small quarters in staccato bursts. Rayan sat on the edge of their bed, his bed, holding her tags in one palm, the metal warm from his constant touch. The atmospheric sensors screamed warnings about the electrical activity, but he ignored them. Let the storm rage. It matched the howling emptiness inside him. Thunder cracked so close the walls shuddered. The lights died. In the absolute darkness, Rayan felt the air itself seem to tear, pressure dropping so fast his ears popped. Another lightning strike turned his bedroom white as a supernova, and when his vision cleared, Nadira lay in his bed, naked and trembling, and glowing with light that came from within her skin.
Recognition through touch. Rayan couldn't breathe, couldn't move. His mind refused to process what his eyes were showing him. Nadira's face, her hair plastered wet against her cheeks, her body shaking violently in his bed. But threads of silver light traced beneath her skin like living circuitry, pulsing with her rapid heartbeat. And her eyes, when they opened, swirled with violet and hazel and patterns that shouldn't exist in human irises. "Rayan," she whispered, and her voice carried harmonics that made his bones resonate. "Please, please tell me you're real. Tell me I made it home." The sound of his name in her mouth shattered his paralysis. He lunged forward, hands reaching for her face, and the moment his fingers touched her wet skin, she sobbed, a raw, broken sound that tore through 5 years of his carefully maintained composure. She was warm, solid, real. "Nadira?" His voice cracked. "How—" "They took us," she gasped, pressing into his touch like a drowning woman finding shore. "The Whispered kept us in stasis, changed us, made us into—" Her luminescent patterns flared brighter, and she flinched. "I'm not what I was. My body, they rewired everything. I can feel quantum spaces now. I can hear stars breathing, and I don't know if I'm still—" He kissed her, desperate and clumsy and 5 years too late, tasting rain and salt and something electric on her lips. She made a sound between a laugh and a cry, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer until there was no space between them. "Still you," he breathed against her mouth. "Still mine. Still Nadira." Her fingers found the tags hanging around his neck, her tags, the ones he'd worn every day since they gave them to him. Fresh tears spilled down her glowing cheeks. Rayan traced the silver filaments with trembling hands, following their paths across her shoulders, down her arms, marveling and grieving simultaneously for what she'd endured. "I navigated by you," she whispered. "5 years of folded space, and I followed the memory of your heartbeats home." He pulled the blanket around her shaking body and held her while she wept. 5 years of separation condensing into this single storm-bound moment of impossible reunion.
Reclaiming home. The storm raged outside while they created their own weather within. Ryan couldn't stop touching her, confirming reality through the warmth of her skin, the solid weight of her body against his. Nadira trembled under his hands, her luminescent patterns flaring and dimming with each breath, each emotion passing across her transformed features. "I don't know how this body works anymore," she admitted, voice breaking as his fingers traced the silver threads down her spine. "Everything feels different, stronger, more. I'm terrified I'll hurt you, that I'm not—" "You're Nadira," he insisted, lips finding the hollow of her throat where her pulse hammered against his mouth. "My wife, that's all that matters." She made a sound that vibrated through both their bodies when he kissed the glowing patterns across her collarbone. Her hands found his face, pulling him up to meet her eyes, those impossible, beautiful eyes that swirled with captured starlight. "I need you to know me again," she whispered. "Need to remember what it feels like to be human, to be yours." They undressed each other slowly, learning new maps and remembering old ones. The silver tracing spread across her entire body, concentrated over her heart, spiraling down her limbs in patterns that reminded him of solar flares. When he touched certain lines, she gasped, her back arching, light pulsing brighter under his fingers. "Here?" he murmured, discovering this new language of her body. "Everywhere," she breathed, pulling him down. "Don't stop touching me. 5 years I survived on the memory of your hands. Show me it was worth it. Show me I'm still home." What followed was tender and desperate, familiar and strange. Her enhanced senses made every caress feel like electricity, her responses immediate and overwhelming. She cried his name like a prayer, like an anchor, patterns blazing bright enough to illuminate the rain-streaked windows. Ryan memorized every sound, every shiver, rebuilding their intimacy from fragments and faith. Afterward, tangled together under that old navy blanket, her luminescence settling to a soft glow, Nadira finally smiled, the first real smile he'd seen in 5 impossible years. "Home," she whispered against his chest. "Finally home." Dawn's threat. Dawn arrived too soon, gray light filtering through the rain-heavy clouds. Ryan woke to find Nadira pressed against him, her patterns dim in sleep, one hand clutching his shirt as if afraid he'd vanish. He was memorizing the peaceful curve of her face when the warning system chimed, low-altitude aircraft approaching the station. Nadira's eyes snapped open, immediately shifting to that otherworldly violet. "Military," she whispered, sitting up. "They're tracking the quantum signature from my arrival. Ryan, they'll take me. They'll put me in a lab, study what the whisper did to me, use me as a weapon." "No!" The word came out fierce, final. He was already moving, pulling clothes from the closet, tossing her his shirt and her old flight jacket. "Get dressed. We're leaving." "Where can we possibly go? They have satellites, tracking." "I've been mapping these storm valleys for 5 years," he said, fingers flying across his personal terminal. "I know places atmospheric interference makes invisible, but first I need to erase everything that connects us here." Nadira caught his wrist, her touch warm and urgent. "Ryan, this is your life, your career, You're my life," he interrupted, turning to face her. "Everything else is just details. 5 years I existed without you. I won't spend another day helping them take you from me again." Her eyes filled with tears that glowed faintly in the dim light. She kissed him hard, desperate, grateful, while outside the approaching aircraft grew louder.
When they broke apart, they moved with synchronized purpose, the practiced teamwork of a partnership that war hadn't managed to destroy. Ryan systematically corrupted his research files, uploaded false atmospheric readings that would send search parties toward the northern wastes. He wiped biometric data, burned authorization codes, created digital ghosts that would lead nowhere. Nadira, meanwhile, was manipulating the quantum residue around the station with focused concentration, her patterns flaring as she scattered her energy signature across dozens of false locations. "There's a maintenance shelter in the Obsidian Valley," he said, shouldering a pack of supplies. 3 days hike through terrain that'll scramble their sensors. It's supplied, fortified. We can disappear. "You planned this," she realized, watching him work with practiced efficiency. "How long have you been preparing to run?" He met her eyes, and the raw honesty in his expression made her breath catch. "Since the day they told you you were dead. Some part of me never believed it, never stopped hoping you'd come back, and I promised myself that if you did, nothing would take you from me again." The aircraft were landing outside. They had minutes, maybe less. Ryan took Nadira's glowing hand in his, laced their fingers together, and led her toward the emergency exit that opened onto the storm-shrouded wilderness. Behind them, alarms began to wail. Ahead, rain and darkness and freedom. They ran together into the storm, leaving behind everything except each other.
New constellation. 3 years had passed since that desperate flight into the storm valleys, and the hidden shelter in Obsidian Valley had transformed into something neither of them had dared imagine, a home more real than anything they'd known before the war. The converted maintenance station now held Nadira's carefully tended garden under atmospheric lamps, Rayan's hand-drawn star charts covering one entire wall, and furniture they'd built together from salvaged materials. Rain still drummed constantly on the reinforced roof, but inside, warmth and light and the quiet rhythm of their shared existence filled every corner. Rayan sat at their worn table, sketching nebulae formations, while Nadira stood behind him, her luminescent hands draped over his shoulders, humming something that sounded like starlight translated into melody. The patterns beneath her skin pulsed gently, synchronized now with his heartbeat, a biological rhythm they'd discovered in their second year, proof that her transformation had somehow bound them more deeply than even they understood. "The fourth moon is rising," she murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. "Want to watch it together?" They stepped onto the narrow balcony where rain misted their faces and the storm-filtered moonlight painted everything silver. Nadira's patterns brightened in response to the celestial light, creating constellations across her skin that Rayan had named after moments they'd shared: the return, the first morning, the day she'd laughed again. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly, leaning into his embrace. "Everything you gave up for me?" Rayan turned her to face him, cupping her glowing cheek in his palm. "I gave up a job. You gave up being a weapon. We both chose each other over what others wanted us to be. That's not regret. That's the best decision I've ever made." She smiled, that radiant expression that still made his heart stutter, and kissed him with 5 years of gratitude and 3 years of hard-won peace. Her patterns blazed bright enough to rival the moonlight, and when they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and grinning. Inside, under the old navy blanket they still playfully fought over, they tangled together the way they had 1,000 nights before, familiar now, but never ordinary. Nadira's enhancements meant she could sense his emotions through touch, could feel his love as surely as his heartbeat, and the feedback loop of their connection created its own kind of music. "Home," she whispered against his lips, the same words she'd spoken that first impossible night. "Always," he promised, pulling her closer, through storms and stars and everything after. Outside, the rain continued its endless song. Inside, 2 people who'd survived war, separation, and transformation built something the universe couldn't touch, a love that existed in the spaces between heartbeats, stronger than any military could weaponize, more enduring than any conflict could destroy. They'd lost years to the war,
But in finding each other again, they'd discovered something worth more than time, the fierce, unshakable gravity of two souls choosing each other, again and again, until the stars themselves burned out. Lessons from The Gravity of Returning Stars. True love survives transformation. When we love someone deeply, we love not just who they are, but the essence that persists through all changes. Scars, trauma, time, and even impossibility cannot erase the soul we recognized from the beginning. Home is not a place, but a person. The coordinates that matter most are not found on any map, but in the arms of someone who chooses to hold us through every storm, who sees us completely and refuses to let go. The bravest act is choosing love over security. Real devotion means being willing to burn down the safe life you've built if it means protecting the person who makes you feel alive. Courage is measured not in battles fought, but in what you're willing to sacrifice for those you cannot bear to lose. Healing happens in the spaces we create together. Recovery from trauma is not a solitary journey, but a shared one, built through patient touch, whispered reassurances, and the revolutionary act of allowing someone to know us in our most vulnerable, transformed state and love us anyway.